So I was putting myself in these situations hoping that an opportunity would come out of it instead of just being intentional with where I was going and the decisions I was making to create the opportunities I wanted. So I was kind of thinking about it backwards. So if I could go back, I would think, okay, where do I want to go, and sort of take steps towards that, because it's not going to happen obviously like right away. So, what can I do to sort of inch
Mil2Vet Podcast, your veteran and military podcast, talking about transition stories and veteran affairs. This episode, we bring you Brooke Oachs, who shares her transition story into the Navy Reserves. Also, let's congratulate her on making HM1. This is going to be a great episode as she helps veterans find new purpose in the Navy Reserve. Let's go.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, Brooke, are you active now? Did they reactivate you to be a full-time recruiter?
They did. They're called CANREC orders. So after you're on orders for over 29 days, you're considered active duty. So I am on orders I just extended for my 3rd year, but I'm going on about a year and a half doing this so far.
Yeah, that's really awesome. Is this something that you like, just you did it and then you're like, wow, I really like it, and you're just
So originally, I was basically just looking for a way to hop on orders and get active duty pay and honestly just move out of state. I'm originally from Minnesota. Um, but I kind of got into it and I'm like, okay, this is kind of nice. I like to network. I like to talk to people. And now I'm actually I'm completing my PHR and I'm looking to maybe commission as an HR officer or permanent professional recruiter. So I've come to like it, actually.
For our audience, what is PHR? What does that mean?
Professional and Human Resources. So it's basically a certification that you get. It's recognized both in the military world and civilian world. And the Navy's paying for it, by the way, which is really nice. Uh, so that's basically one of the requirements to become an HR officer.
Is it the Cool Navy Cool program? Is it TA? What program is actually funding that certification for you?
Onward to Opportunity.
Onward to Opportunity. Can you talk a little bit more to what that is?
So it's a program. So spouses can do it. Spouses of active duty members, separating members, or CELRES, selected reservists, qualify to take different courses. So they have IT courses. Obviously, I'm doing the PHR course, and it's free. The education portion is online, and then they pay for you as long as you pass 3 final exams of 80% or more. They pay for your final exam and certification.
Wow. So it's all about the timing and the right resources. Where can they go? Where can our audience go to find more about this besides just Googling it up?
Yeah, so on LinkedIn they have Joanna, I think her name is. I can send you the link of her LinkedIn, but she is the one that I reached out to originally, and she was able to sign me up for the class.
Beautiful.
hmm
so you got out of active duty, then you went reserve. What was your thought process about activating again?
So I was actually really excited to go back on active duty orders. Life is pretty, I don't want to say easy when you're collecting a paycheck on the 1st and 15th, but you have a lot less to think about. So in the civilian world, I was kind of, soul searching. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And so it was just really easy for me to sort of hop on orders. And a lot of people use the reserves as a full-time job, if you will. So they call them career reservists. They go on a mobilization, they come home, and they hop right on another mobilization. They go home for like a month, and they just keep doing that up until retirement. So that way you have a little bit more say on where you go. So I am sort of debating, do I stay and do that? Because I'm going to be on these orders for 5 years total. I'm already at 10 years. So, whatever gets me to the 20, honestly, at this point.
And now let me ask you this, right?
Mhm.
So you were in during your first transition out of the military. Can you talk about that experience? How did that happen?
Yeah, so it's pretty scary because you get so used, like, I'm the type of person when I'm doing a job or in a certain situation, I just adapt really quickly to it. So for me, I couldn't really see my life outside of the military. So then as soon as you're coming home, I detransitioned in Virginia, and it sort of hits you at the end, like you're so worried about checking out, you're so worried about all these things, and all of a sudden it just hits you like, oh, I have to find a job. Oh, I have to worry about healthcare all of a sudden and everything like that. It was a little bit easier for me because I still qualified for TRICARE Reserve Select, so I didn't have to think too much about the healthcare portion. But for some people, that's obviously a huge struggle. I deal with people every day that are coming off active duty, and that's people are worried.
Did you know that you were going to be going into the reserves before you got out? Was that part of your
Yeah,
plan?
that was always kind of a part of the plan.
How many years did you serve active?
4.
4 years. And then was your first original 3 years active afterwards? Is that what you did? No, 3 years reserve. Sorry.
Yep. So the rest was reserved, but I went on mobilization. So as soon as I got into the reserves, I went on a mobilization in 2020 to Guantanamo Bay. So I met a lot of cool people doing that. It's kind of a way for me, I was just using it to buy time before. I was just waiting for this epiphany, like, this is what I want to do with with my life. This is what I plan my whole, you know, the aha moment. But obviously, as you guys probably know, that never comes. Like, you just buy yourself some time and then you have to decide. And so I was kind of sick of, just living life like job to job, orders to orders. So that's why I applied for these, a little bit more long term, um, everything like that. So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
So just so you know, Chris is currently looking for his Guantanamo Bay coin, right? That's why he got the squirrel moment. If if I didn't know him,
Okay.
yeah. So that's what he's doing. So you, I want to talk more about what you just said, right? You got out. Your part was to be part of the reserves, right? Until you found that aha moment, and then it hasn't really fully fulfilled or fully developed, right? Um, what advice would you tell yourself if you could go back in time, right, to the young lady before she joined the military, period? What advice would you tell her or give her so that she's successful during those 4 years, and whether or not it was a good move to get out or stay in or all of those things?
Yeah, so I think the biggest piece of advice I could give is be intentional with really everything you do. I was very willy-nilly, like, let me just try and see what happens. Let me try and see what happens. And I was putting myself in these situations hoping that an opportunity would come out of it instead of just being intentional with where I was going and the decisions I was making to create the opportunities I wanted. So I was kind of thinking about it backwards. So if I could go back, I would think, okay, where do I want to go, and sort of take steps towards that, because it's not going to happen obviously like right away. So, what can I do to sort of inch towards my ultimate goal?
What so while you're going through your process, did you were you the mindset that you had while you were going through that process? You, you kind of said that you're kind of willy-nilly a little bit. What was your mindset at that point? And now, how do you think your mindset has changed since then, since you've been doing recruiting for 3 years?
So I think initially you have this, I don't know if it's blinders or maybe inflated ego or what it is, but just thinking that there's so many um like jobs out there that are just like itching to have you. I always was told like, "Oh, military members, that you have military in your resume, you're gonna get a job." And I was just thinking I was gonna make this good money. And I was an E5 in charge of a disaster weather program, managing like millions of dollars worth of medical equipment. So I'm thinking, oh my gosh, like my civilian employer is obviously gonna see my worth, but that doesn't necessarily translate all the time. Um, so I think that's the biggest sort of hurdle I had to cross, is really like, okay, I kind of am starting from the bottom out here. I kind of, have to rethink maybe my opportunities, and take a job that I wouldn't normally um, take in order to, and that's ultimately why I came on orders. And now being able to coach people through it that are coming off active duty, or people that have been out, um, that I mean, I tried to explain maybe that, but I think everybody has to go through it maybe themselves to realize that that's the case out there.
So what was your rate when you were in the Navy?
HN.
So you're a corpsman,
Hmm.
which is um, which is part of our medical field for people that don't know. So you went from working medical and then you became a recruiter. I feel
Hmm.
like, and now you're talking about seeking a position as a higher level recruiter. So it sounds kind of like you may have found something that you really like in the recruiting world. Um,
Hmm.
what what do you think it is, and do you think it's close to what your actual purpose is?
So I was always looking for a career shift because my degree is in economics, so I was always looking for that sort of way I could try to do something else. And I think the part that I really enjoy about recruiting is being able to help people, not only with obviously placing them in the reserves, but they come to you with a lot of other questions. Not even necessarily military related, but I'll have people, contact me and they're like, "Hey, I just really am struggling right now. I need help writing my resume," or something like that. And I'm able to help them, connect them, because with the military, obviously it's so much runaround. You get pointed in all these different directions. Sometimes you don't, there's so many resources sometimes that it's hard to know, who to ask the questions to. So sometimes being that liaison for people is really what I enjoy. And I think that's why I want to take this sort of a step further. Um, because the higher I go, the more impact ultimately I'm going to have on people's careers and everything like that. So,
Would you go back and change anything of your transition, reintegration, retransition journey?
um, I don't think so for me personally. I got really lucky. I've kind of sort of fallen into something that I enjoy. Um, but yeah, I don't think so.
What part of recruiting, and I think Chris kind of asked that, but I'd like to dive a little bit more into it. What part of recruiting do you really love? Right? You talk about helping or being the liaison and stuff like that. But from my perspective, I think you enjoyed the being the glue, correct me if I'm wrong, and seeing people be successful, seeing that those eyes open and being able to see the new opportunities that they almost let go. Is that correct?
Yeah, so something I've noticed, especially with like fleet sailors, is they have such, like, the ones that have such a negative experience, and that's the reason that they're getting out. Is I think people are just being told that they can't do things, or people just make their lives harder than it has to be. So I just really enjoy being that person. At first when someone talks to me, they're kind of like on guard because I'm a recruiter, right? But being sort of that person that's encouraging to whatever it is that they want to do, even if it's crazy. I want to be a professional baseball player. Okay. Well, it's not my job to tell you you can't do that. So let's figure out a way that we can make it work. okay, you can be a professional.
Join the Navy, become part of the Navy baseball team. Yeah.
Right, right.
Sorry.
No worries. So yeah, I mean that's the biggest thing. Or hey, you wanna be a professional baseball player? You're gonna need health insurance, type of a thing. So I think that's the part that I really like.
Interesting.
Hey, Do you do you recommend any kind of books to those who are about to transition out that would probably help them through the transition? Books, podcasts, media, anything in those?
So I think, maybe not so obvious one is the Fleet and Family Services Center. I went there the other day. Actually, I was working with a gentleman that kind of was dealing with a lot of mental health stuff. And I was like, okay, let's get you connected with a resource. And they just bombarded me with all of this information and all of this stuff. And I was able to give him like a whole folder of things that he could do. And they said, yeah, we can even help people after, up to 90 days after their transition. So that is one for sure. More of a, not so military related one is I'm really big on like self-development. So right now I'm reading a book called the Power of the Subconscious Mind. So that's a really good one, kind of getting a hold of like learning how to get a hold of your um, state of mind and way of thinking. I think that is really powerful, especially coming off of a high stress like working environment. Um, and especially because I think people are going to deal with, mental health things as soon as they get to the civilian world, especially if it's not a fleet concentrated area and maybe they feel like they can't relate with their coworkers, or if they're struggling with something like that, like being able to sort of manage that. And yeah,
I've never heard anyone mention that book, and I love it because that book is really intense, especially in a good way, right? Have you read the Start with Why by Simon Sinek? That's the only book
no.
that came to my mind. Oh my goodness, you need to read that.
What is it called?
Start with Why by Simon Sinek.
I'll check it out.
Um, yes, and please let me know, and then we can talk about that book. Um, and especially for what you're doing right now, I think you already have a great technique of what you're doing, right? And talking to people because you're coming from a really great place in your heart because you truly believe everything that you're doing. Now being able to carry on that conversation, I think you'll be able to be even better. Plus, it'll give you a better insight on yourself.
I like that. That's right up my alley.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we could sit here all day and throw books out there. I think one of my favorites, is, I mean, Start With Why is like a super good one. But let's look at like, Carnegie, influence, was it the influential, how to,
How to make friends and influence people.
yeah, that's it. How to make friends and influence people. That's a super good read. And it's an original, like it's an older book, but it's really still a relevant book.
Might be good for me too, making friends.
Oh, I don't know why, but I assumed that and again, it's part of who you are, your personality and everything. I assumed that you had already read the book. You
I'll
project
take that
some
as a
of those
compliment.
qualities. Yes, yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Please do. Um, it, it's a really, it's a really powerful book. And then one more, the last one,
Oh
Okay.
my
the
goodness,
40,
Yogi, come
the
on.
48 laws, the 48 laws of power.
Oh, yes. Yep. I have read that. I need to reread it though,
Yes.
because yeah.
Yeah, so before we continue going down that rabbit hole of books, 'cause I'm just getting excited now talking about books.
We we do a lot of reading, a lot of reading.
I love that.
Well, mostly listening. Actually, I just put a hold on that book that you suggested. So,
Okay,
This
cool.
this is
Oh,
what I'm currently reading right now. So I listen
wow.
Yeah. And then, this book came up, and this guy's coming on our podcast here soon.
Oh,
So
which
Brett
episode?
Cozier,
I'll make sure
he's
to.
he's recording with us June 6th, so I expect
Okay,
that we're going to be going live with him. But
cool.
yeah, I think education is good, but I think reading books and not just reading it and then throwing it away, you know, you actually have to like take a look at it and be like, what am I going to take from this and
Hmm.
implement it into my life? If you at least do that, 1% mentality is kind of how I look at it. You take 1% of that book and like, how do you apply it to your life? Um,
Right,
because if you're just reading to read and you're not making any changes, it's not really doing what it's designed to do. It's those books are designed to change something, an aspect of you.
right. I think nowadays too, with consumerism and everything, people think that they have to pay a lot of money to like learn really valuable lessons, and that's not necessarily true. There's so much information available online, on videos, books. You don't have to spend, a year's worth of tuition to learn something valuable.
When was the first time that you started reading, and how did you get to that point?
So I actually kind of got into self-development and everything since basically COVID. I always was the type of person that felt like I sort of had more to offer, if that makes sense, than like what I was doing. So I'm like, well, what's going on here? So then I started reading, um, you know, basically self-help books, and I was like, okay, it's interesting because a lot of the things that are being taught is like repeating. And I'm like, well, all these people have basically the same thing to say. It must be true. So then, you kind of start implementing in your life. That's why it's good to keep reading because you have to keep reminding yourself, like, we're creatures of habit. So we're going to go back to what we're used to. So you have to keep working towards, the goal. The goal, it's like going to the gym. You can't just go to the gym once. You have to be consistent, to see results. So it's sort of the same.
Is
Don't
that what
worry,
my problem
Yogi.
is?
Round is a shape.
You're
Yogi's
like, I
like,
don't
I'm
know if I'm
staying in shape.
good.
But I went to the gym.
Yeah, once you should be good.
Exactly.
That's it. Once a year.
So I want to talk a little bit about part of your approach, right? Um, so and we're tailoring this a little bit to more of the recruiting side of things, right? Because you are a recruiter, and because we want to know more about the experience. I myself was not a recruiter in the Navy. I have I was recruited to be a recruiter in the civilian side, and we've talked about that part briefly. Uh, and it's been crazy to see the difference um, that someone can make in somebody's life just by being that person, right? It can be a huge um, opportunity that will change somebody's life, or it can be a total waste of time for both parties, right? Or you can completely overpass someone that would have been fantastic for an opportunity and they just go because of timing or because of anything else. Um, so for anyone that's out there in the military or is thinking about joining the military, right? What would you tell them about dealing with a recruiter?
I would I would suggest, so one, do your research, especially since I work with prior service members. I mean, people, I can't really lie to them. They know exactly where to find instructions. They know exactly what to look up. But if you're a civilian, definitely, talk to people that are already in, figure out, don't be in a position where the person that is benefiting from getting you in knows more about a situation than you do. So that would be my kind of first piece of advice. Um, I guess it would be the same thing almost as like selling houses. It's like, do you want someone to if you have a bad realtor, then if a person comes to you and doesn't know anything, you're kind of vulnerable, and they could sway you in one way or the other, like give you a deal that's going to pay them more, but not necessarily is the best for the client. Um, but yeah, that would be my biggest piece of advice. And don't be afraid to shop around, almost like finding a realtor too. So just because, you want to join, if you're like really hard charging and but you really don't like your recruiter, you don't feel like they have the best for you in mind, find someone else. I mean, how many recruiters work in the station? Maybe work with another person. Um, go to a different station maybe. I mean, they're not going to like that very much, but ultimately it's your career, it's your life. So don't be afraid to do that, because some are better than others, and that's just how it is.
Yeah, you're not stuck to just one recruiter. Um, and I mean, if you're in a smaller rural area that has less options, yeah, but that's pretty sound advice.
And even if you are in a rural area, you can always call somebody else, right? So so for me, my recruiter was by far the best recruiter in the world. As a
Oh
matter
wow.
of fact, um, I don't even remember their name, if that tells you anything. Only interacted with that person twice, and that was all my doing at the beginning. Actually, three times. I lie. At the beginning, when he went and talked to my mom, and when I went to MEPS. That was it. And I
Wow.
was part of the delayed entry program. So I entered a whole year before. I was supposed to be going through that
What?
training the entire year, right? And I didn't talk to that guy. And then he called me at the end, and because I was having cold feet, like anybody does, right? And instead of talking to me and figuring out what my problem was, he started threatening me that my citizenship was going to get revoked, that I was going to lose all these things, that no one was going to hire me because all these things, nothing but lies, right? And I was like, wow, it's insane. And I was too young to even think about, well, I can go somewhere else, right? I probably should have gone somewhere else. I mean, it didn't matter. I was going to join the Navy anyways. Uh, the only reason I didn't backtrack was because my mom, my brother, and my sister actually had an intervention with me because I was not joining the military because of my high school sweetheart. Yeah,
You were in love.
completely.
It's a love story.
Yeah, it
I'm not
was. It really was.
surprised.
Right.
Not
Uh,
surprised. Yogi,
but but with that, right? So my sister, who was against me joining the military from the beginning, she's the one that told me. He's like, "Hey, you need to join because you don't know what you're doing with your life." And I was like, "You're right. I can't argue with that logic." He could have told me the same thing, and I would have listened. I would have come to my senses. But it wasn't about what was said. It was how it was said. And I was a kid. And how many horror stories do you hear throughout your entire career, right? And I think part of it is the slowest denominator, trying to get the most bang for your buck with doing the least amount of work. So and that's how recruiters, not just in the military, but just all recruiters, period, get the worst reputation, period, because there's a lot of people out there that are just trying to get the the lowest service. I mean, you kind of said it. He's like a used car salesman, right? You can either be a really good salesman, and if you are a really good salesman, you don't have to sell anything. It'll sell itself. Or you can try to force something down their pipe, and they're gonna hold it against you.
Right. I know that's the biggest thing. That's why, like, a lot of times I'll talk to people and they're like, "Oh, sorry, like I already talked to somebody. I'm not qualified." And so at first I would just say, "Oh, okay," because I didn't want to press them. But then if someone really wants to join, I ask them, "Well, why are you not qualified?" And maybe the recruiter just didn't want to work them, so they just said that because they were a little bit harder of a person. Maybe they had to do a waiver or something like that. So I have no problem work doing the extra work to get these harder applicants in if it's something that they really want to do. I'll work those people all day. What I don't want is an easy applicant that I have to convince that this is for them, because then it feels too forced for me. I I mean, the reserves isn't for everybody, but it's for a lot of people, and a lot of people just need to realize that, I think. So,
Oh, that's awesome. And you're you found your new thing that you really enjoy, and it sounds like you're pretty passionate about it. So that's pretty awesome, and an option for those who transitioned out maybe a little too early, or let's say you're listening to the show and you don't like your rate. There's a path. Now, that process
exactly.
is probably not guaranteed. You have to apply for, I assume. What was that process like for you to apply to do what you're doing right now?
So, so just since you mentioned about the rate thing, so if someone doesn't like their rate and they get out, as long as they qualify and the rate is available, they can do it. Some of them you have to go back to A school, some of them you don't. So just to kind of give you information on that. But for me, so in general with orders in the reserve, so basically the commitment is 1 week in a month, 2 weeks out of the year. That's the minimum you have to do in order to get a good year. But there's a lot of different opportunities to volunteer for like what I'm doing, or maybe just 1 month stints, maybe 29 days, something like that. So we go on once you affiliate with the reserves, you go on the ZipServe website and you basically browse. It's kind of like going on Indeed for like a civilian looking for jobs. And you just scroll it, you scroll and you apply. You just press the little apply button and that's pretty much it. Sometimes you can send your resume to one of the hiring people or points of contact. Um, but a lot of people worry about mobilizing, but it's actually like getting tagged for mobilization, but it's actually kind of like the opposite. People, especially in San Diego, really want to hop on orders. Like I put my roommate in and he's been trying to do what I do and he's applied twice and he hasn't even gotten an interview yet. So it's a little bit competitive, but it's definitely worth it if it's something that you want to do, I think. And it's all about, the politics, who you know. No, what you know, who you know.
So, can you mention the website again for those people that are interested?
So ZipServe is you have to be in the reserves and have a CAC in order to access the platform, the website. Yep. But that's that. And obviously, if people have questions, they can reach out to me as well.
Why? So let's backtrack a lot, right? How did you end up coming onto the podcast?
So I saw you on LinkedIn. And I just reached out. It was as simple as that. I liked what you guys were doing. I wanted to be involved, and we just met up. And you had invited me to the golfing event, which was great. And yeah,
And another thing that you mentioned before, you wanted to have a different approach to reaching people, right? Um, because when you're doing the same thing over and over and over and over again, you reach out to the same amount of people, the same pool, and it just becomes monotonous, right? And some of those people,
yeah.
they already said no, they don't want to have anything to do with it, and they're even more negative towards recruiters and anything like that. So with that, I personally want to thank you for taking the time to continue to improve on yourself, for helping out our service members and our transitioning service members that are coming through, for also finding different ways, more creative ways to be able to reach the people that really want to take this opportunity to the next level, right? And for being awesome. Seriously, you have an amazing attitude. You are extremely professional, and you wear your heart on your sleeves. Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. That's kind of the biggest thing. I don't want to spam people that have been being contacted. I want to talk to the people that genuinely are interested and want information, and it's as simple as that.
And with that, Brooke, we would love to have you back on the show anytime that you want to. If there's any news, any other events, or anything pertinent to our community, we'd love for you to come back and tell us, even if it's just a 5 minute, hey, there's this new program, there's this new thing, so that all our listeners are informed, because that is
Okay,
the only way.
awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. And this at the bottom of the screen is how we can get a hold of you, correct?
Yes, that's my LinkedIn.
So, is there, you got any, as Chris would say, you got any saved rounds or alibis before we wrap up the show?
I don't think so. Thank you. This is my first time ever doing a podcast, so
Woohoo!
I feel like famous over here. But
Yeah.
but yeah,
Hey,
this
you
has been
do.
great. I look forward to working.
Hey, Brooke, thank you for coming on here and sharing your story. It really does mean a lot to have you as part of our Mil2Vet tribe. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
To all of our listeners that are out there, hey, maybe reserves might have something in hold for you. You know, look, there's a lot of different options whenever you transition out of the military. And let this be a great resource for somebody that's out there. So if you know somebody that's thinking about possibly doing this, please share it to them. And please also get onto LinkedIn and connect with Brooke and let her know that Mil2Vet sent her or sent you guys to her. So that way she knows, hey, wow, this podcast thing worked. So everybody that's out there, remember, it's your transition. It's not all rainbows and unicorns. It's your transition. Take charge of it. Mil2Vet out.